Welcome, my bountiful friends. It's time to grab a saucer of champagne or a highball of woo-woo and partake in a Charleston or a cheeky foxtrot before trying to guess the true occupation of our host. Because today we're going to be at one of Gatsby's splendid parties. This story centers on a mysterious and forlorn figure who likes to entertain the neighborhood with lavish parties. As always, there will be as many spoilers as there are broken hearts and tragic events. And there will also be plenty of opinions too, so you have been warned. But before we begin in earnest, don't forget to like and subscribe. It's greatly appreciated. F Scott Fitzgerald began shaping what would become the Great Gatsby during the early 1920s, a period marked by his rising literary fame and the social world of New York's elites that he inhabited. Several different aspects of his life at this time formed key elements of the story. One was a youthful romance with a Chicago heiress, whose world of inherited wealth and social exclusivity left a lifelong imprint on him. He also drew heavily from the lavish parties he attended on Long Island's North Shore in 1922, where he observed the excesses, illusions, and class tensions of the Jazz Age firsthand. In 1924, Fitzgerald and his wife Zelda moved to the French Riviera, where he began drafting the novel in earnest. By that summer, he had completed a rough draft and sent it to his editor at Charles Scribner's Sons. The manuscript was admired, but Fitzgerald was urged to revise it, especially the structure and characterization. He'd spend the winter of that year and much of 25 revising it extensively, tightening the narrative and sharpening Gatsby's arc. His first two novels, 1920's This Side of Paradise and 22's The Beautiful and the Damned, had both sold well. So The Great Gatsby was not difficult to place with Scribner's. And he was asked to revise multiple times, and the editorial process itself was vigorous. But the path to publication itself was smooth, and his main struggle was not with acceptance but with finalising the title, which he changed repeatedly before settling, somewhat reluctantly, on The Great Gatsby. It was published on April 10th, 1925, with striking dust jacket art by Francis Cougat. The artwork impressed Fitzgerald so much that he wove its imagery into the text during revisions. Scribner's initially printed 20,870 copies, a number reflecting their confidence in Fitzgerald's commercial appeal. This Side of Paradise sold over 40,000 copies in its first year, while Gatsby failed to meet 20,000 by October of its first year, and its second run would be a mere 3,000 copies. In fact, Fitzgerald earned far more from magazine stories than from that novel. By the time of his death in 1940, he believed that the book had failed and that his career had faded. Only later, especially after the US military distributed over 150,000 free copies to soldiers during World War II, did the novel's readership surge, transforming it into one of the greatest American novels ever written. J. Gatsby, aka James Gats, is the titular gravitational centre of this novel, and it's his desire that drives the plot forwards. He's a young, handsome man with a carefully curated aura of wealth and polish. He lives in a grand Gothic mansion, dresses in flamboyant, immaculate clothing, and is known for his rare smile that conveys deep reassurance. He's idealistic to the point of delusion, and he's single-minded and romantic, driven by an almost mythic sense of destiny. He's secretive and emotionally arrested. He is the enigmatic figure that sits at the centre of the party. Nick Carraway is the actual narrator and moral lens of the novel. But he's not the protagonist. It's his perceptions that shape the story. He's a young Midwestern man, clean-cut, well-educated, and understated in appearance. He's honest, observant, tolerant, and inclined to reserve judgment. Curious but morally anchored, he becomes increasingly disillusioned with the East Coast elites as he seeks to understand the world of wealth and glamour that he inhabits. He serves as both participant and witness to the events. Daisy Buchanan is the object of Gatsby's desire and the catalyst for his transformation. Her choices drive the novel's conflict. She's beautiful, with a famously alluring voice, full of money, and is often dressed in white, projecting purity and charm. She's superficially charming but emotionally fragile. Deeply shaped by privilege, she avoids pain, responsibility, and difficult choices, and is cynical beneath her lightness. Her primary motivations are to maintain comfort, security, and social status, and she wishes to be adored without having to commit to any personal sacrifice. Tom Buchanan serves as the antagonist. He represents old money power and moral decay. His actions trigger the novel's tragic chain of events. He's a large, powerful, and athletic man with a domineering presence. He exhibits arrogant, racist, sexist, and hypocritical attitudes and is violent and entitled. He believes in his inherent superiority, and he's emotionally shallow but fiercely possessive, seeking to maintain his dominance and control, as well as preserving his social position and masculine authority. Myrtle Wilson is a working-class woman who becomes Tom's lover. Her affair with Tom exposes class tensions, and her death becomes the novel's tragic turning point. She's a contrast to Daisy's ethereal beauty in that she's sensual, earthy, and vibrant. She's also ambitious and dissatisfied, and desperate to escape her class trap, and mistakes Tom's attention for a path to a better life. George Wilson is Myrtle's husband. He's gentle, devout, and emotionally fragile, but physically pale, spiritless, worn down by life and poverty. He's crushed by Myrtle's infidelity and the bleakness of the Valley of Ashes, and only wishes to keep his marriage intact. His grief and confusion leads to the novel's violent climax. He represents the human cost of the wealthy character's carelessness. Jordan Baker is Nick's romantic interest and Daisy's confidant. She provides insight into Daisy and Tom's world. She's slim, athletic, with a cool, self-possessed demeanour. She's a professional golfer with a slightly androgynous elegance. She's detached, cynical, and actually dishonest as she cheats at golf. She's emotionally guarded, valuing her independence. Her primary concern is maintaining her autonomy and social standing and avoiding any emotional entanglement. Maya Wolfsheim is Gatsby's link to the underworld and the source of his illicit trading. He's a 50-year-old man with hairy nostrils and sharp eyes. Shrewd, criminal, opportunistic, but he's oddly loyal to Gatsby, having been won over by his character. But by his very nature, he is entirely self-interested. He reveals Gatsby's criminal connection and embodies the underworld that keeps things moving beneath the jazz-age glitz. Gatsby unfolds through the eyes of Nick Carraway, a young Midwesterner who moves to Long Island in the summer of 22 to learn the bond business. He rents a modest house in West Egg, a district populated by the Nouveau Riche. Next door stands a vast mansion belonging to the mysterious J. Gatsby, a man known for throwing extravagant parties, attended by hundreds of strangers who know almost nothing about him. Across the bay in East Egg lives Nick's cousin Daisy Buchanan and her husband Tom, an imposing and arrogant man from old money. Early in the summer, Nick visits them and meets Jordan Baker, a professional golfer with whom he begins a casual romance. During this visit, Nick learns that Tom is having an affair with Myrtle Wilson, the wife of a struggling garage owner in the desolate Valley of Ashes between West Egg and New York City. Nick is eventually invited to one of Gatsby's legendary parties, where he finally meets his elusive host. Gatsby is charming but oddly nervous and soon begins to cultivate a friendship with Nick. Through Jordan, Nick learns the truth. Gatsby and Daisy were in love 5 years earlier, before Gatsby went and joined the First World War. Daisy married Tom while Gatsby was away, and subsequently Gatsby brought his mansion in West Egg solely to be near her, hoping that she would wander into one of his parties. Now he wants Nick to arrange a reunion. Nick agrees, and the meeting at his cottage is awkward at first, then deeply emotional. Daisy and Gatsby begin an affair, and Gatsby becomes convinced that Daisy will leave Tom. He insists that she must tell Tom that she never loved him, thereby erasing the past so that it can begin again. Tensions rise as the summer heats up. Tom grows suspicious and confronts Gatsby during a trip to New York City. In a suite at the Plaza Hotel, Tom exposes Gatsby's criminal associations and mocks his pretensions of being a well-heeled gentleman. Daisy wavers under the pressure, unable to renounce Tom completely. The confrontation ends with Daisy and Gatsby driving back to Long Island in Gatsby's yellow car. On the return journey, Daisy, not Gatsby, strikes and kills Myrtle Wilson, who had run out into the road believing Tom was driving. Gatsby decides to take the blame, waiting outside Daisy's home to ensure Tom doesn't harm her. Inside, however, Daisy and Tom quietly reconcile, retreating into their wealth and leaving Gatsby to face the consequences alone. George Wilson, devastated by Myrtle's death and manipulated by Tom into believing Gatsby was both her lover and her killer, shoots Gatsby in his pool before taking his own life. Nick tries to arrange a funeral, but almost no one comes. Daisy and Tom vanish without leaving a forwarding address. Disillusioned by the moral emptiness of the East Coast, Nick ends his relationship with Jordan, distances himself from the Buchanans, and returns to the Midwest. Reflecting on Gatsby's dream and its collapse, he concludes that Gatsby's longing for a perfect, recoverable past mirrors the broader human struggle against time and reality. The novel is defined by a style that blends lyrical precision with a cool observational detachment, which creates a narrative voice that is paradoxically both intimate and distanced. The novel's prose is famously musical. Sentences ripple with rhythm, imagery, and symbolic meaning, and Fitzgerald's language is lush without being overwrought. His metaphors often carry a double or even triple meaning, allowing the text to shimmer with emotional and thematic resonance. This stylistic richness is filtered through Nick Carraway's reflective narration, which adds a layer of retrospective melancholy. Nick's voice is measured, ironic, and self-aware, shaping the novel's atmosphere as much as the events themselves. Fitzgerald's style is also marked by symbolic density. Colours, weather, and landscapes are not merely descriptive details, but emotional and thematic cues. The green light, the grey valley of ashes, the golden white of Daisy's world. Each contributes to the novel's atmospheric layering. The settings themselves feel mythic. East Egg and West Egg become opposing realms. The Valley of Ashes, a wasteland of moral and spiritual exhaustion, and New York City, a frenetic stage where illusions are performed and unravelled. This symbolic geography gives the novel a heightened, almost allegorical atmosphere, as if the characters are moving through a stylized dreamscape rather than a strictly realistic world. The atmosphere of the novel is one of glamour edged with decay. Fitzgerald conjures a world of glittering surfaces, champagne, silk dresses, polished cars, glowing lights. Yet beneath these surfaces lies a pervasive sense of emptiness. The parties at Gatsby's mansion exemplify this duality. They are dazzling spectacles filled with music, laughter, and swirling crowds, but they are also impersonal, chaotic, ephemeral, and strangely lonely. The atmosphere is shaped by a temporal fluidity. The narrative moves between present action and reflective commentary, creating a sense of memory unfolding. The past hovers constantly over the present. Gatsby's dream, Daisy's voice, the lost moment of perfection that can never be recovered. This gives the novel a wistful, melancholic tone, as if everything is already slipping away, even as it happens. Ultimately, the style and atmosphere of The Great Gatsby combines to create a world that is seductive, fragile, and haunted by longing. The prose invites the reader into a shimmering illusion, only to reveal the shadows beneath. The result is a novel that feels oddly both timeless and transient. At its core, the novel is about longing. Longing for love, for identity, for status, for a past that can never be recovered. Fitzgerald builds this thematic architecture around this central ache, layering it with motifs of illusion, class, desire, and the corrosive pursuit of dreams. One of the most prominent themes is the impossibility of recapturing the past. Gatsby's entire life is structured around the belief that a perfect moment with Daisy, frozen in his memory from 5 years earlier, can be restored through sheer will. His insistence that, of course you can, repeat the past reveals both his romantic idealism and his tragic blindness. The novel suggests that the past exerts a gravitational pull on all the characters, shaping their choices even as it remains unreachable. Nick's reflective narration reinforces this theme, as he constantly looks backwards, trying to understand how events unfolded and what they meant. Another central theme is class and social hierarchy. The novel's geography, East Egg, West Egg, and the Valley of Ashes, maps the rigid divisions of American society. East Egg represents inherited wealth and entrenched privilege. West Egg symbolises new money and social aspiration. The Valley of Ashes embodies poverty and the human cost of the elite's carelessness. Gatsby's dream is not only romantic but social. He wants to cross a boundary that society will not permit to be crossed. Daisy's inability to lead Tom is not simply emotional but structural. She belongs to a world that will never accept Gatsby, no matter how dazzling his performances. The American dream runs through the novel as both promise and critique. Gatsby's rise from James Gatz of North Dakota to the owner of a palatial estate in New York seems to embody the dream of self-creation. Yet, as just mentioned, regardless of how well he does in life, he will never truly be accepted. Since America, like other countries, operates a hidden social structure where one must be born into money and power in order to be accepted by the highest echelons. This means that Gatsby's ascent, criminal enterprises, dubious partnerships, and relentless reinvention suggest that common folks can only come close to realizing the dream through corrupt means, and that the game is secretly fixed by those who are already at the top. The novel portrays a society where wealth is worshipped but can rarely be earned through honest means, and where aspiration ultimately leads not to fulfillment but to disillusionment or destruction. The novel explores moral carelessness and the consequences of privilege. Tom and Daisy Buchanan epitomize this theme. They act impulsively, hurt others, and then retreat into their wealth whenever things go wrong. Their carelessness leaves destruction in its wake. Myrtle's death, Gatsby's downfall, George Wilson's despair, yet they themselves remain untouched. Fitzgerald uses their behaviour to highlight how power and privilege shields the true elites from accountability while exposing ordinary people to ruin. Together, all these themes create a portrait of a world shimmering with beauty yet hollow at its core, where dreams glow brightly but burn out quickly, and where longing itself becomes both the engine of life and the source of tragedy. When the novel was published in 1925, its critical reception was strikingly muted and its sales mediocre. Reviewers were not hostile so much as uncertain, and many failed to recognise the novel's structural precision or its symbolic ambition. According to the scholarship on the novel's history, early critics tended to dismiss it as an overly stylised work, and Fitzgerald himself, while enjoying commercial success with his earlier novels, was disappointed and increasingly convinced that Gatsby had failed to find its audience. So Gatsby was largely dismissed upon publication and only later rose to literary greatness. This early indifference was shaped partly by the cultural moment. The 1920s literary scene was crowded with experimental modernist works that pushed the boundaries of the format, and Fitzgerald's blend of lyricism and social critique would have seemed remarkably bland in comparison and not immediately aligning with the prevailing critical tastes that demanded something new and boundary-breaking. Many reviewers saw the book as a stylish but insubstantial jazz-age entertainment piece rather than the serious artistic achievement it actually was. Typically of the world of literature, the transformation of the novel's reputation began only after Fitzgerald was safely dead in 1940. During World War II, the US military distributed large numbers of inexpensive armed services editions of the novel to soldiers, dramatically expanding its readership. This posthumous circulation helped introduce Gatsby to a new generation, many of whom later became teachers, scholars, and critics. By the 1950s, the novel had entered American high school and university curricula, cementing its place in the national literary imagination. From the mid-20th century onward, critical interest in the novel grew rapidly. Scholars began to recognise its structural elegance, symbolic density, and incisive exploration of class, aspiration, and moral carelessness. A study of the novel's critical evolution highlights how different decades produced distinct interpretive frameworks, ranging from examinations of the American dream to analysis of class, race, and mobility, demonstrating the text's richness and adaptability. This multiplicity of readings contributed to its ascent as a central work of American modernism. The novel's legacy has also been shaped by its many adaptations. Film versions from 1949, 1974 and 2013 each reinterpreted the story for new audiences, generating renewed debate about Gatsby's character and the novel's themes. These adaptations, even when controversial, helped keep the book culturally visible and contributed to its mythic aura. Today, The Great Gatsby is widely regarded as one of the defining works of American literature. Its endurance is attributed not only to its stylistic brilliance but also its thematic resonance. As one modern critic notes, the novel remains compelling because it addresses enduring issues of class, privilege, imagination, and hope, concerns that are never not going to be interesting to people. Nearly a century after its publication, the novel has become a cultural touchstone. It began in obscurity, but now stands as a central text in the American canon, endlessly reinterpreted and continually rediscovered. History consistently shows us that contemporary critics, whether literary or film, all too often chase a trendy flavour of the month rather than assessing a book or a film on its own terms and merit. Frequently, they have held gold in their hands only to dismiss it as lead. The Great Gatsby is clearly gold standard literature. It reads just as well today, a century later, which is no mean feat, as many a classic can turn into a dry or turgid affair after even 50 years. And its character remains engaging and its themes are as relevant today as they ever were. If anything, they are even more true today. We arguably live in an overt Nepo world where the wealth has become so concentrated and controlled that one can be as talented as they like, but they're highly unlikely to get past the establishment gatekeepers. Initial access, mass market exposure, and critical acceptance seems to be tied to a person's existing social status rather than the value of their skill or art. I appreciate that this may sound super negative to some, but a quick look at an actor or a writer's parentage or schooling will normally reveal the truth of the matter. Publishing houses insist on dealing only with literary agents. Unknowns are expected upon approaching literary agents to demonstrate an existing, extensive social media following and robust self-publishing sales figures, which logically negates the whole point of a literary agent in the first place. The character of Gatsby shows us that being brilliant and successful on your own terms and using your own capabilities is not enough to be accepted by society's elite circles, and that they are, by their very nature, highly protective of their own exclusivity. And if they should feel threatened by your presence, as Tom is of Gatsby, then they will probably engineer matters in order to destroy you. At its core, Gatsby is a wake-up call to the reader. It tells them not to dwell on the past, no matter how good it was, and that you must always move forwards. It also warns about trying to impress others, suggesting that you'll be far happier and have an easier life if you live authentically and on your own terms. Another thing I think it tells us is that you should have realistic expectations of life. You may end up at a Gatsby party and you should probably enjoy the moment for the fun that it is. Just don't expect to gain anything meaningful or lasting from it. Enjoy the present wholeheartedly without seeking to extend it into the future. And finally, I think the novel tells us to embrace the authentic. Looking at what others have is always poor form that invites envy and other negative emotions. It's better to embrace what you already have around you. Sometimes a front row seat at a new bar band playing their first gig for the price of a beer really is a much more rewarding experience than a $500 or pound ticket that puts you at the back of the stadium tour of one of the world's most famous bands. And since this channel is primarily concerned with literature, I'll say that sometimes a low-selling self-published ebook may really turn out to be a much more engaging and rewarding read than a best-selling hardback ghost written for some media celebrity. So, what were your thoughts on this sad tale of broken dreams and superficial socialites? Which character did you like the most, and which scene did you find the most profound? Once more, don't forget to like, subscribe and hit that bell icon for more deep dives into the world of literature. Until next time, keep reading, and remember, if a mysterious stranger buys a nearby mansion and begins to host a series of elaborate parties that go on into the small hours of the night, then it's probably best to feel really sorry for them. Until next time, good night, old sport.